Hey, Senda.
Hey, Phil.
Quick question. Whose responsibility is it for having fun in a role-playing game?
Trick question. We should talk about that.
Cue music. And welcome to another episode of Panda's Talking Games. I am the GM who likes to entertain you all, Phil.
And I am the GM who also likes to entertain. What am I supposed to do with that?
And I'm a player?
That makes
I mean,
it sound
you're a
like I
GM
just
too,
play. That's silly.
Oh, all right, let's try another one.
I am your other host, Senda. I'm not editing this.
Oh boy. Well, sorry for the intro, everyone. Again, this is just a perfect. This is actually that exchange perfectly encapsulates this episode during our quarantines. As we remain in lockdown and as we are taking it somewhat, quote, easy on the show, we are neither scripting it, therefore Senda did not know what to say in response.
Yes, correct.
Nor are we editing it so that when she did it wrong, we don't correct it. So that is basically what you're getting for the next half hour to 45 minutes, however long the show goes. You are getting it neither scripted nor edited, and yet we are pretty confident it will still be entertaining.
It will still be entertaining. It just means that the outtakes are buried within the show itself, except for that one that we stuck right up front.
Totally botched the opening.
You know, maybe we should start planning the openings again.
Nah. I like sometimes you're right in line with me and like you get where I'm going.
Yep.
And other times like totally not. I was playing off player and GM, but never mind.
I know, but it was a lie.
Are you not a player?
I am that too.
Are you currently GMing any games?
Okay, fair enough.
I'm not saying you're not a GM. Of course you're a GM. But are you not also a player? I am also a player.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
All
Okay.
right.
Okay. Good.
What I was shooting for was I am the GM who likes entertaining you, and then you were going to be like, and I am the player who is also responsible.
Who likes entertaining you also.
Yes, which now leads us to our topics. Hey, Senda, I know there must be a point to this show if we're going to do one. What's the topic for tonight?
Well, gosh, Andrew Dacey in the Slack Room for Life brought up a cool thing. I'm going to paraphrase what sort of the main gist of the topic was, which is essentially, as a player, how is it your responsibility, or in what ways can you be responsible for helping the GM bring the fun? So we would like to tonight dispel the myth of the GM being solely responsible for the fun at an RPG table. Yeah?
Yeah. I think that I don't know where it comes from, and I've definitely experienced it, so I believe that there is this misnomer that, and I don't know, it falls into this kind of general mindset of players, right? Players show up to the game, GMs show up, run the game, like basically, quote, do the work, right? Which is like a terrible thing. And we talked about a couple episodes ago about players' responsibilities for, doing stuff in the game. And like, we're back here again on this, right? So, I've definitely experienced this, like I said, where I've been in game groups where it was like everybody sat back and was like, entertain us now, Phil, with, with your adventure and story and stuff. Which, is fine if you're firing on all cylinders and ready to go. But
oh, man. But like Sunday morning at 8 a.m. at the con, it can be rough.
It can be pretty rough.
I've been that person. And all your players just stare at you. And you're like, okay.
And the truth of the matter is, right? The truth of the matter is that we all have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to be entertaining in the game, be it whether you have the GM role or you have, quote, the player role, because much like fingers and thumbs, everybody at the table is a player. The GM has a special role as one of the players of the game.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really interesting. This occurred to me, and it is not on our list of top things to talk about for this that we quickly jotted down in the 30 seconds before we hit record. So bear with me. The interesting thing about RPGs, and I think that this entire topic just lends itself to this conversation, is that when us nerds do silly things like put professional RPG stuff on resumes, for example. Mm-hmm. What do we talk about that RPGs do for us? We talk about leadership, we talk about teamwork, and we talk about communication and working with a group of people for a shared goal, right? So this is the kind of situation where we get to say, like, a game is a team activity and everybody is responsible for participating and contributing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we know this is true, right? The reason we know this is true is that if you play a game that is, quote, GM-less or has a distributed GM role, people still have fun.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Wild, right? Like, people play Fiasco and they have a great time.
Correct. So it completely dispels the theory that you have to have a GM, like the GM is responsible for bringing the entertainment to the game, right? Like, yes. The GM has a role in being entertaining, right? And has some additional responsibilities in terms of kicking off the scenario for the evening, getting that session going and that kind of thing. But we all, as players in a game, we all have a responsibility to also be entertaining, not only to ourselves, but to everyone else at the table.
Bring the fun.
And that is what we're going to talk about tonight. And yes. We're going to approach it from a couple different places, because there are different things that you can do to be entertaining as a player.
Right. Or also different pitfalls that you can just generally avoid to avoid being that person who
which are kind of
blocking the fun. So we have sort of split it into two categories. One is in the process of starting a game, and one is during actual game play. So let's start with if you're like starting a game.
Yes. So we're going to define this as everything from before there is a game.
Yes.
All the way through the end of session 0, because I actually have a couple of ideas that are brewing as we're we're talking. So this is everything from before there's a game through session 0. Then we'll talk about from session 1 on.
Yes. Good. Okay. Cool. That makes sense.
So cool. I would say the first thing is that your acceptance to come play a game is your first responsibility to be entertaining.
Yeah, I agree. And specifically if somebody comes to you and they say, I want to run this game, and you look at it and you go, I know that I dislike this game, or even I have no interest in playing this game whatsoever, or whatever it is, right? Don't say yes, right? Like, right. Unless you can sit down at that table with a true positive attitude to at least give it a very fair shake, just politely decline and jump in on the next one.
Yeah, now that's easier said than done.
It is.
Depending on how gaming and your social group and things like that overlap, right?
For sure.
I will say that in the past, in my social group, not being in a game was pretty harsh. It was our main way of getting together and interacting with each other. So if you were to bow out of a game because there was no prediction of how long a campaign could last, right? 4 sessions, 3 years, whatever, that was a problem. So our group, for better or for worse, our group took the tact of we will not run a game that anyone is not interested in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other direction to go. Yeah.
Right. So ours was we're going to need group consensus to say that we are all excited about playing this game. And that meant that there were a lot of games that I wanted to run that I did not get to run because various members of the group were not hot on it. And we just skipped those games to play other games that we all were excited about. Until that became untenable. In one of my game groups, that reached a point where that was untenable, and that game group kind of broke up, and pieces of that game group reformed into other game groups.
I mean, just to speak really briefly to my current game group experience, because this is a style of game group I have not had before, and I'm going to say, like, I love it. So we run short campaign arcs and a lot of little one-shots, and stuff happens all the time where it's like, actually, I mean, I play everything, but say Andy, for example, plays with us about 50% of the time, right? And it's not a big deal at all. And so we were like, we're going to play Cartel. It's going to be great. And she was like, not feeling it, like pandemic, very serious content matter. I'm going to sit this one out. And it's like, cool, not a big deal, right? Like, it's not that long, and it's not going to be some permanent thing. And like, we ended up running a one shot last week instead of the conclusion because the GM was busy. And like, so she was back in on that one shot where we, played Halloween. Yes. Halloween Hallmark. Yes. And it was great. But like, so it's one of those like stepping in or stepping out, depending on how any particular person feels about the game itself, or like how it's going to go, or just how their life is going at the moment, is like not a big deal, which is amazing. It's really cool. Not everybody has it set up like that, but it's amazing to have that, right?
It's great if you can get your group set up like that.
Yeah.
The alternative is then the way I said it, which is that sometimes you will sacrifice running games that you really want, or you will need to go find another group to go scratch that itch.
Yep. Cool.
So, all right. So I think that's and I will also say, just as one extra thing to tack onto that, this also very much, and we've talked about this on many past episodes of the show, this also applies to when you sign up for a con game.
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, for a con game, like 10 times, right? Like, do not sign up for a con game you are not interested in. Why would you do that to that poor GM?
Exactly. Right. This is...
Please don't.
Yeah. So,
and especially in our quarantine times, because it is much harder to share energy and spoons through the computer at all of these online conventions. As a GM, you are putting a lot more energy out into the universe to get things started and to make things tick. Don't suck people's energy out of them for something that you are not interested in. Just don't do it. That's me.
Yeah, and when we say not interested, we're not even talking about fully resisting, like, this game's stupid, I don't want to go. It could literally be like, I'm not really, like, this, I'm lukewarm to this game.
Right.
Again, this goes to another thing that we've talked about a lot, which is enthusiastic consent, right?
Yeah,
so
that's not enthusiastic.
You need to enthusiastically consent to the game that you are going to play. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't be playing this game in the long run. Yes. Okay, that's first part. Mm-hmm. What's the next part?
The other part of this is like when you show up at a session.
Oh, I'm gonna pause you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move that one over.
Yeah,
I'm gonna move that one over.
So then
to the next part.
We've actually
I have one more.
Covered everything that we wrote down. So you should do the one that you thought of.
So the other one is, you have a responsibility for making an interesting / entertaining character for this game.
Ooh, yeah, you do.
Right. Yeah. So no lone wolves.
Well,
right?
Or listen to our episode on lone wolves.
Listen to our episode on lone wolves.
Do it right.
If you're going to do it at all, I highly recommend you don't.
Do it. Yeah.
But what it means is when you show up to the game to make your character, don't play it completely safe. Right now, we're gonna say this again on the next section too about not playing it safe, and I'm going to say that this is a sliding scale, right? Depending on your game's tolerance for failure.
Yes.
Right? So some games are not forgiving
Lethality.
about failure.
Yeah.
And, wind up suboptimal decisions wind up getting you killed, while other games thrive on imperfect successes and failures, like PBTA games, where that kind of stuff is just gold. Right?
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Exactly. So
or even Fate and your
your compels and
Thank
things
you.
like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're making your character, your character is your extension of the game. So the first place you need to be entertaining is in your character.
Yep.
Whether that is the way you embody your character, but before session 1, it's less about embodying your character and it's more about what is your character bringing to the group? What is your character bringing to the how, if this is a campaign, how this group is going to, like, what they're going to do in the long term, right? Like if you are all sand sailors on the great sand sea and you have picked the water mage, right? You had better find a good reason to be the water mage, right? Otherwise, like, you're going to suck the fun out of it. Because if you make a character that you are not happy with, you have already failed the first part of this, which is you must be entertaining to yourself in order to be entertaining to others.
Yes.
Right? So if you have hamstrung yourself in character creation, then you have a problem.
Yeah. I mean, and I think one more thing that I would add to that list of yours, because this is how it works for me with successful characters, is that as you go from session 0, as you jump into the game, make sure that there is one hook that you have for your character that you know that you can immediately play. Whatever that is. Something you care about strongly, a person you're going to play off strongly, something that excites you that's going to come up a bunch, so that as you get accustomed to playing this character and figuring out and feeling your way into really how they work and how they tick, because that kind of thing can just take time, you have to have something that you can sink your teeth into quickly so that you can immediately be involved, be invested, and entertain yourself so that you can entertain others.
So we wound up playing years ago. We played it's famous on the Misdirected Mark. We played a very cool campaign of Dungeon World in the Airy Peaks, right?
It is famous on the Misdirection Mark.
Now, I mean, here's the thing. The Airy Peaks was a pickup game that we were playing because one of our players dropped out of our new Numenera game, and we thought this was just going to be a temp game.
Right.
So when I made my character core, I didn't actually spend a lot of time on like making this character very deep, but I did the thing that you said. I was like, I need something that propels this character forward in the first session.
Exactly.
And
yes.
I fixated on this. I fixated on the barbarian's insatiable appetite move and the carouse move from the game. And this is where I got into this idea that this barbarian is basically just getting money so that he can go back to town. He's going in the dungeon to get treasure, to go back into town to just indulge all of his earthly pleasures.
Yeah.
And that I took it like one notch higher, that this was like a habit seeking, like this was like a drug seeking kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That he was professional in the dungeon and like he was an entire frat party unto himself in town.
Moment
like
he was in town.
Well, he didn't save money.
Yeah.
Like I mean, every other character I think saved money. I spent all my money. Right. Like
time,
I just as soon as we come out, I'd just take my share. I'd blow it until I was broke.
Yep.
And then I'd wake everybody up and be like, we got to go back in the into the dungeon.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that was my initial impetus for the character, and it was for the early part of the game more than enough to get the job done.
Yep.
And to be entertaining to everyone else, because everyone else loved it. Like, after between adventures, there'd always be the story of like, where do we find Core?
Yeah.
Like, passed out somewhere, whatever, having drank and, indulged in physical pleasures, that kind of thing.
Well, so the last game that I played for She's a Super Geek, which is coming out when you hear this, it'll be last Tuesday. And content warning, wow, World War II, Nazis. But the last character that I then made for that game, like I specifically looked at it, and this was a lot darker. But she'd lost her husband in the war, and so she was joining the special forces, basically to follow in his footsteps. Like, so she was determined to like go big or not go home, right? Like she was in it, and so she like went big and like did not hold back and made risky decisions with big results kind of thing. But like that was the thing that I went in there for, and that's a little bit more subtle to actually play. But you know, the moment that it's still something that you have, right, that you know about the character as you walk in, so that you know and understand like how to interact with other people at the table, how to describe even a first scene, or like what they look like in that first moment, all of that stuff, right? How they would be acting, what they would be doing. Yeah, important stuff. It's really funny. Every now and then I get a character where I sort of fail to do this. I have one right now, which is really funny that I'm talking about this, because it's bringing it into very stark contrast for me. I'm like, oh, that's what's going on. I get it. That I'm like, okay, I need to rethink. Like, I need to figure out what her thing is, because the reason I'm having trouble engaging with other characters and stuff isn't that I'm not engaged. It's that I don't understand how she engages. So like, okay, cool. Like I know how to fix that. But it is funny. I mean, it happens to the best of us, right? Where you think you have a thing, and then like, it's like a month between times you play, kind of forget what's going on. And you're like, oh, I don't remember what I'm doing now. Did I have a purpose?
Yeah. So I mean, I think going back to that, right? Purpose is a big deal. And that is not the GM or the group's complete responsibility, right? There are components of it that are their responsibilities, right? Players should have connections to other players. GMs need to kind of take the hooks that players are putting out there regarding personality, plot, or whatever, and incorporate them into their material, right? Like, again, all of this is a group effort, but very much so, starting with you need to make a character that is going to be entertaining in this game.
Yeah. And be proactive. Like, they're going to be a character who would take actions, not a character who's going to sit at home on the farm.
Well, now we're going to get into session 1 stuff. So let's segue.
Let's move along.
Let's move right over to the session 1 advice. Starting with, I'll do this one because you had mentioned it first. I'll mention it, and then I'm going to let you do the second one, which I think is really cool.
Okay.
Because I want you to do that one. The next one is when you show up to the game. Okay, you person, not your character, you person.
Player.
Yes, you the person, the player, need to be aware of how you're doing when you sit down to the table to play. Because you do have a responsibility to be entertaining, to contribute to the table and things like that. And if you're not there, if you are distracted because of school, if you are exhausted because of work, if you are not feeling well, although I think that one's going to go away. I don't think anybody's going to be playing with anyone else who's not feeling well.
If you're not feeling well, just don't.
Right.
Don't spread it.
That's the old days. That's the old days when my players would show up with like a mild cold and just come to the game anyway.
Yeah, no, don't do that anymore. Don't do that. No.
But if you have nothing in the tank, you need to acknowledge that, right? I'm not saying don't show up to the game. There are different ways groups handle this, right? Each group has their own way of handling this, but you need to signal that your tank is empty, right? So you just got to come in and be like, or text everyone and be like, hey, like I just had like the world's worst day at work. I feel like I've been run over. I got nothing, right? Some groups are going to deal with this by saying, hey, no problem. Skip tonight. We're going to play. We'll catch you up when you get there. For some groups, that's perfectly fine. Other games aren't going to be really tolerant for skipping players. So that group might be like, hey, don't worry about making it. We'll just play something else. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we'll hang out. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we'll just cancel. Right. In the old days, maybe we'd get out a board game. But now that we're not in the same space, like, we'll go.
This Discord has ghosts in it.
Right.
Always default to this game now.
So the point being is that if you don't have it, you need to tell people about it rather than like showing up and trying to like push through.
Right. Unless like the one exception to this, it is fair to sit down at the table. I have done this and say, wow, that was the worst day at work ever. Please pour me a drink. I think that this is going to help. Right. If you think playing is going to help and you're like, this is going to feed me energy and then I will be able to feed it back into the game. Okay, cool. If you think that it's going to hurt you or the game for you to play, nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
All right. So assuming that you're okay to play.
Yeah.
What is the next thing?
So, the next thing is actually, to help the main storyline go, like make it tick, which we have a whole episode about this because it's taking the bait, right? Take the bait. There's a hook in it. Just nom that worm, crunch down on it. It's all good. And then let the GM reel you in. Don't fight it. It's all good. Just take the bait.
Right. And really what we're saying is to be receptive of what's going on at the table, right? So it's being I thought that was the one you were going to do, to be honest. I thought you were going to do the receptive one.
Well, you said the next one and I did the next one. There's like 6 on this list.
That's all right. So
okay, keep going.
Let's blend these two together.
Yeah, sure.
So taking the bait is really the first part of this idea of being receptive, right? So it's about part of being entertaining is not only entertaining yourself, but is also the entertainment of everyone else at the table. And so part of what the GM is trying to do is that in games that have a GM and have a typical kind of scenario adventure structure, right? So there are games that don't do this, but many games we play do this. The GM has put something together in order for you all to go on some adventure mission, whatever. You're at the beginning of this thing. Make it easy for the GM. Make it easy for everyone at the table. Just as soon as the old man in the corner, looks up from his drink, take the quest and let's get started.
Right. Jump in. Go do it. But it also means being receptive to the ideas of your fellow players at the table. So this is not just about getting started, although it is about getting started, and it's about continuing to take those plot hooks as they happen as the story goes forward. It's also about when someone sitting next to you says, hey, I think maybe we should light that bridge on fire. It's about saying, yes, we should, because that's cool and interesting. And if we burn the bridge down, then, the marauding bandits can't come across it or whatever it is. And so, it's about being receptive to the GM. It's about being receptive to the other players at your table. And it's about listening so that you hear that stuff and then building on that opportunity. We could have a long conversation about improv at this point. We won't. I will just really briefly say, hey, there's a whole book of games that help you build these skills in real time. It's called Improv for Gamers. It's by Karen Twelves. It's a great book. You should probably check it out. She's been making some notes on Twitter about some of the games work really well online, some of them not as well. I played a bunch of them online for She's a Super Geek, so you can check out that episode and get an idea for at least some of the ones that do.
Oof, hard plug. Nice
I know.
Cool. Toss me another one.
How about, let's see, we actually kind of talked about having ideas for your character.
Good.
We sort of blended it in elsewhere. The other one that we actually have on here is make interesting and entertaining decisions, which
cool.
Can I have a one-shot moment here? And just for my one-shot fans here, make brave and heroic decisions. But we're going to say make interesting and entertaining decisions.
Yes, because your game may not be brave nor heroic.
Well,
if you're playing Cartel, you may not be brave or heroic. But you do need to make interesting decisions.
Yes.
Okay. So what do we mean by interesting decisions? And again, this is going to be on a sliding scale based on how the game that you're playing deals with suboptimal choices.
Yes.
which makes me think that may be suboptimal choices, may be a misdirected mark topic at some point.
I feel like we could do something specifically with players in terms of player advice in this particular miniseries about making suboptimal decisions as a player.
I could totally do that, but I was also kind of thinking of the mechanics behind suboptimal decisions.
Mechanically, for game design stuff, you should do that on misdirected mark. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it with you, but that's where we pretend to draw the lines between our show topics.
It's really only so that we don't poach topics across each show.
I know, but you do anyway.
Okay, let me get back on track here so that we don't wander too far off.
Happy outtakes.
So let's go back to interesting decisions and let's talk about suboptimal decisions, right? Yeah. So suboptimal decisions are when you do not make what is the, quote, best move in the game. And different games have different tolerances for this, right? A game like 3rd edition D&D doesn't really have a safety net for suboptimal decisions, right? So if you make a suboptimal decision and, walk into an enemy attack for, a whole bunch of dice and now you're dead, that's not that much fun.
No.
Right? That's not really entertaining.
Hard consequences kind of situation.
But if you are playing Dungeon World, on the other hand, where you go and do a thing and then you roll and you get a 6 and 6 minus, the GM has an array of moves to make and also has an obligation to make it interesting. So they basically play off of your interesting move with their own interesting move and take it up a notch.
Or say you're in Hydro Hacker and you keep failing rolls until you finally end up trying to steal the gun from the bad guy who works for the Water Authority and almost get your companion killed. But it was such a fantastically fun scene that neither of you will ever stop talking about it.
Yeah. Exactly. So the idea of this being is that if your game has a tolerance for suboptimal play, that be open to the idea that the decision that your character makes may not be the one that as a player you're like, oh, clearly they should not open this door. It's clearly trapped based on what's going on in this. But just open the door and let it ride.
So this is a thing to me, like from a design mechanics perspective, suboptimal decision making is the correct way to describe this, right? From a player perspective, when you are walking up to that door, what we're really saying is take the risk, right? Like if the game tolerance allows it, be willing to take risks. And instead of playing like this character as a porcelain doll that is your favorite toy. Be willing to take risks because risks make interesting decisions. Risks make play entertaining because you've created stakes by taking a risk. If you never take a risk, then the GM has to try and create all the stakes for you at all times. When you make a risky decision like, I'm just going to open this door, you've immediately created stakes by not checking that door for traps, right?
Yeah. Or you clearly know the monsters behind the door. Or, whatever.
Just do it. And it's really easy to do these things in one shots because drive it like you stole it, right? It's sometimes harder when you're really far into a campaign, but also when you're really far into a campaign, sometimes the decisions are much more interesting anyway because they've gotten more complicated.
Right. Now, I want to caveat this by saying that there is an extreme version of this, which is what I like to call chaotic stupid.
Yeah, don't do that.
And that is not entertaining.
No. Nobody likes chaotic stupid.
Right. That is just like making bad decisions in a passive-aggressive way to kind of damage the campaign. And in which case, in many cases, you are just ruining people's fun, not making it more entertaining. So the point of this is in the middle, because we are adults and we can reason and we understand not extremes. In the middle of this, there is a place for making suboptimal decisions that makes the story more entertaining.
Yeah.
And that is where you want to point your character.
I'm just going to say a thing and then we can wrap this up because I think we've touched on pretty much everything. The thing that I want to say is, as someone who has played a lot of Kender in my life and gotten a lot of shit for enjoying playing Kender, the discussion that I end up having, and I have had on this show before, every time someone gives me shit for playing Kender, is
and it has been many.
And it has been many, but it is this conversation right here, right? Because being a Kender will give you an excuse to take risks that are interesting.
Yes.
Especially if you have agreement from people at your table that you're going to play like this and that they can stop you, right? Sometimes, right? But that you should be taking risks and that you can take risks, but it doesn't mean that you're playing chaotic stupid. And no, I'm not going to listen to all y'all out there then telling me that I'm not playing Kender right, because I want to play Kender in a way that people will continue to want to play with me at the table. I don't care what your version of quote right is.
Right.
Let's just to clear all of this up. It comes at me from all angles. People hate playing with Kender, and then people are like, well, you're doing it wrong if people actually enjoy playing with you. Well, okay, fine. But there is a version of playing a risk-taking character that is enjoyable to play with and can drive the game forward, right? And make things happen. And there's a range between the two extremes. The one extreme being like, we don't take 2 steps without checking every tile on this floor to see if it's going to collapse under us. Well, that's not very much fun, frankly.
Let's not editorialize that. That may be fun for certain people.
It could be fun. Okay. From a character perspective for me, I find that it makes the game happen very slowly, and I tend to get frustrated with that mechanically.
That's fair.
That's fair. That's a fair way for me to say that? Okay.
That's fair.
So that is why my statement was that. That's true. I don't want to shit on anybody's fun. I'm saying the word shit a lot. We are explicit. You have been warned. But from the other
late
side,
for that.
on the other side of this coin, so on the other side of this coin, you get the people who do play chaotic stupid, which is like, I'm just going to light this on fire because I was left alone for 30 seconds. And like, okay, like, why?
Again, the reasonable middle.
Right. So there's the range in the middle, and you can play a range of the types of characters that fall into the middle, right? You can play brave. You can play brave and heroic decisions that are not smart decisions.
I will sum this up with a quote from Roger Rabbit. From Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In the scene where where Roger's got the handcuffs on, mm-hmm. and I forget the guy's name. The human guy is sawing him off. And he's sawing and he's sawing and he's sawing, and then Roger takes his hands out of the cuffs and talks to him, and the guy looks at him and he's like, "Are you telling me you could have taken your hands out of those handcuffs at any time?" And Roger looks at him and goes, "No, only when it was funny." And that is what we're talking about by making suboptimal decisions. We're not talking about make every decision suboptimal. Make suboptimal decisions when it's going to make the game better.
Yes. Yeah.
And that unto itself is actually a whole topic.
It really is.
We may do it next week based on this discussion. And suboptimal decisions mechanically may be a topic for a future Misdirected Mark show,
Good.
which is also a possibility. But is there anything else we need to say about the responsibility as a player for bringing the fun, your portion of the fun, to the game?
Yeah, I will say one last thing, and I will say we have also done an episode on this, so there's way more information out there about it, and that is just share the spotlight. I think when we talked about sharing the spotlight, although I could be wrong, it occurs to me, I'm pretty sure when we talked about sharing the spotlight, we talked about it from GM and player perspective, how to do it from both of those angles, and so you do have a responsibility as a player to help pass that spotlight around or to bring people in on that spotlight, right?
And it's both ways. So
Yes.
Sometimes it's bringing somebody into your spotlight.
Yep.
Sometimes it is sensing that you have reached the important part, the end of the important part of your scene.
Yep.
And pushing the
passing it
spotlight away.
Yep. Pass it
Yeah.
on. Yep.
Okay, cool. Are we good with that?
That's it. Yeah.
All right, so if people have listened to this and have more thoughts or questions around this idea of player responsibility, of bringing fun to the game, we would be happy to talk more about this topic, and we'll tell you how to do it when we get to the closing of the show.
Sure.
But in order to get to the closing of the show, Senda's got to tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yes, I do. And I'm going to tell you about the Gnomecast this week. I'm going to tell you about the Gnomecast specifically because episode 99 is coming out sometime right around now-ish. I don't know exactly if it was a little bit before this or a little bit after this, so just go check it out and see. In episode 99 of the Gnomecast, I will have a bespoke little blurb here. I sat down and had a fantastic conversation with Sharang Biswaz and Lucian Khan about Honey and Hot Wax, which is a really fascinating anthology of games. So you should go check that out and listen to it. It was awesome. They were absolutely amazing to chat with, and I can't wait till it is released to the world. I wish I'd had like 5 more hours because they just could have kept going and it was all gold.
Good.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my very bespoke.
I love it.
this
I love
week.
it. Say, Senda, where do people find us on the internet?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us on the Misdirected Mark forums, which are forums.misdirectedmark.com, or you can drop us an email, panda@misdirectedmark. And Phil, once they find us in one of those locations, what can they do with that information?
So, and this was my point just a minute or two ago, send us topics to talk about. So if you just heard something on the show and you're like, hey, I'd like Phil and Senda to unpack that some more, just let us know. Use any of the means that Senda indicated above. Send us a topic for the show. It can be a question. It could just be a thing that you want us to talk about. You can get really specific and do kind of like the format of the show. You want to know player versus GM, one shot versus campaign, whatever. Like, if you got a query, we want to hear it. You'd be surprised what we can turn out into a show, given a good solid topic. So send them our way. We'd love to talk about them. We really try to do the show primarily on things that you find to be interesting rather than things that we find to be interesting, because we will sit around and talk about the ditch lilies pretty much for an hour if you let us.
Yeah,
so
dangerous.
Anyway, if you like what we do here elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider, if you can, supporting our Patreon campaign. You can go to patreon.com/MMP. It helps a lot. It does a lot for us on the network, and we have various expenses to keep the lights on. So hosting and bandwidth and backups and equipment, things like that. So your patronage helps us tremendously to make all of that possible. We appreciate it greatly, and in return, some of the things that we like to do is one, we'll invite you into our Slack room for life, a fine group of humans that talk about life, talk about gaming, talk about food. There's a lot of talk about food in the recipe channel. There's all sorts of things going on in the Slack room for life. You can kind of just get in whatever pieces you like of it. We have our weekly luncheon, where on Fridays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, get together on Zoom and all hang out. And some of us eat lunch, some of us eat second breakfast. Really depends on what time zone you're in.
Yeah, some of us just keep working but try to be present because it's
Exactly.
like 10:30 in the morning.
You get the bonus outtakes from this show. You'll get the after show from the Misdirected Mark and some other stuff that in the non-quarantines we have put together and given out, and we'll do again someday when things are better. Someday. There is another thing you can do. It also helps us tremendously. Supports our "If you listen to us, you will love us" campaign. The most obvious is go put your earbuds into somebody else's ears and make them listen to our show
With their consent.
With their consent. So I meant like friends and family. Don't do it to strangers. That's weird. But the thing you can do to help strangers find the show, there is a thing you can do. You can go to Apple Podcast or some other places. And what is the thing they can do?
Well, you can leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually help new people find the show, which is super exciting and makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside, like there are pandas playing with our hearts.
It's true. It really is.
Really, it's like little pandas in my chest.
So, say, Senda, what motivation are you going to pick for that character in your game?
Yeah, I'm starting to think that she might be obsessively looking for ingredients for her potions.
Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got, show me what you got, hey, show me what you got, hey, show me what you got, show me what you got.
This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got, show me what you got, hey, show me what you got, show me what you got, hey, show me what you got, show me what you got.
Bloop! Click. No, it's okay. I got it. I'm just I'm split second behind you.
Almost failed clicky.
It's probably close enough. It will not be an issue for me to line up. Yours is usually just a split second after me, so now I'll just line them right up, and then I'll see, like...
You'll be able to find the groan where I'm like, oh.
Well, see, we have to have a conversation now so that I can line up where I talk
Correct.
and you talk.
Yes.
Like that.
Very good.
Delightful.
All right. I am very interested in blasting through this episode. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
That was almost I'm going to take a sip of water.
It was almost a word when it grew up. Agua. Check.
I've eaten chocolate.
I ate chocolate too. And
Drink
I ate
some
my
water.
homemade peppermint ice cream. Homemade peppermint ice cream.
Okay, we save something for the end of the show. All right. You ready?
Uh-huh.
All right. You want some silence before we start?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Count it in. Doot, doot.
Doot. You always have no idea how I'm going to respond to that these days.